go and we've stumbled upon a special guest. Would you be able to introduce yourself, please?
Well, my name's Alf Turner, and most of the Aboriginals call me Uncle Boydie. And my grandfather was William Cooper, and his third wife. She was the only grandmother I knew. My grandmother died when my mother was small. And I lived at Barmer with them just after I was born. I was born in Carlton here, and my family broke up. We lived in North Melbourne, and Mum took off with me as a baby and two elder sisters, and took us to live with grandfather, William Cooper. He had a little place that he'd built on the Murray River, the banks of the Murray River, and I lived with them up to the age of about 3 or 4. And then in 1933 decided to come to Melbourne because most of the people from northern Victoria were coming to Melbourne for work, and from everywhere else too, like Gippsland and all of those places. A lot of people, Aboriginal people, came to Melbourne and were here. So he thought that by coming to Melbourne he'd get a lot of help from the people like Uncle Doug Nichols and quite a few others, the owners brothers, and nearly all of these people on his committee were Aboriginal people.
And could you tell us about the work that your grandfather did, William Cooper, because he's a very famous man in Victoria?
Well, as I said, the grandmother came back up to the bush and picked me up and brought me to live with them here in Melbourne. But I remember grandfather used to walk in to Melbourne from Footscray. They tell me it's about 10 kilometres each way. And sometimes he would bring me with him, but carry books and papers. And he had 4 grandchildren in the house. They were on a pension, the grandparents. And one of his daughters had died and left 3 kids. And he took them in, and of course I was the youngest. And I turned 90 last week. So that's a long time ago. But I saw a lot of the work that the League, he started the League, the Australian Aborigines League, in 1933 when he came to Melbourne. And a lot of those people were on the committee when he wrote the letters to the King of England and the Nazi government during the war in 1938. And they marched on the German Nazi what are you?
Consulate.
Yeah, the consulate in Melbourne to deliver a letter of that they weren't happy with the way that the Nazis were treating the Jews. So they wouldn't come out and talk to them. So they left the letter. The security moved them on, told them they had to move on, and they left the letter that they'd written with the security. And then he also wrote to the King of England, and those 2 letters were never delivered. So Abe and I have been working on this for the last 10, 15 years, and we had those letters delivered to the now Queen of England, and the other one to the government people of Germany. We went to Germany last year, just before Christmas. And yeah.
And so you have an event coming up that you've been talking to people about today. Would you like to talk about that on your flyer?
Well, I could probably tell you a bit about the. They're having a march. It's 80 years since grandfather wrote the letters, and.
You just printed these actually. That's the 80 years ago last week, on Friday the 9th of November, so literally we're exactly 1 week on from that. 9th of November was the night in Germany and Austria that led to what, I've got a Jewish background, but what most historians call the beginning of the Holocaust. It wasn't the beginning of World War II. That actually wasn't until September 1, 1939. But most people regarded the Holocaust as beginning from Kristallnacht, which is the 9th of November 38. And it was reported in the media all over the world about synagogues and Jewish homes being broken into, and particularly the windows being shattered, which is where the word Kristallnacht comes from, the German word, breaking the... And it wasn't called that at the time, obviously it was branded that afterwards. And yeah, a lot of Jews even in Melbourne have got family members who were affected either on that date or afterwards, only if they were in Germany or Austria, because Hitler wasn't in Poland yet and other places, so it was only in Germany and Austria at that point. And one story that Uncle Boydie didn't just mention is that 20 years before that, around World War I, as against World War II that I'm talking about now, one of William Cooper's sons, his name was Daniel, who's actually a brother to Uncle Boydie's mum, Amy. One of the sons wanted to get drafted into the Australian Army. It was called the AIF at the time, and Aboriginals weren't allowed to be recruited into the army. I don't know if you know that story, but some of them were determined for the mateship, and they wanted to go and fight. The RAF fight for a country that didn't recognise them. I'm talking about 50 years before the 67 referendum counted them as people. And Daniel Cooper, so it's Uncle Boydie's mother's brother, managed to get in. There's a whole story to that. Every sentence of this has got a book as a backstory. There is not one bit of this that hasn't got an amazing narrative behind it. So if you're journalists, students or something, there's a story in every sentence of this. And Daniel Cooper got into the army. Had he survived, he would have returned to an Australia that would have treated him as a second-class citizen the minute he got back. In fact, there were Aboriginal diggers who fought, who got in and had land, and that land got taken off them to give as repatriation to white or European World War I diggers, Anzacs, as part of the government's giving housing when they got back. But Uncle Dan didn't have that opportunity to suffer that particular discrimination because he died on the battlefield. He died on the 20th of September 1917, because last year, 2017, on the centenary, Uncle Boydie was able to pay respects. So he'd be 89 years he'd been wanting to do that. We went to Belgium, we found the battlefield, we found the cemetery, and it was known as the Battle of Menengate, if any of you know of any of your World War I history. It's in a cemetery called the Perth Cemetery, just outside of, I can't pronounce, Ypres, if anyone knows how to pronounce it. It's a little town in Belgium, about 2 hours out of, and we drove about 2 hours from Brussels, I think, to get there. And we found the grave, and actually, it wasn't on the day, it wasn't on 100 years to the day, because he died on 20th September, but Uncle Boydie, I know the date he was there, was the 25th of October, so about 5 weeks after the centenary. And the reason why I know the date, it was the 25th of October, because it was Uncle's 89th birthday on the day that we were there. So last week we just had his 90th birthday, and then we went on to Israel to lay a wreath with Malcolm Turnbull, who was still Prime Minister, representing the Aboriginals of Australia for all the Aboriginal diggers that died. You may have seen on the news something about a year ago called the Battle of Beersheba, when Turnbull and others went over there. And then a week after that, it took a lot of organising to do this, like the petition to the King getting given to the Queen. We went to Buckingham Palace before that, but the week after that, he fulfilled a lifelong dream and he went to Berlin. And we got the German government to accept the letter that they wouldn't accept here in Collins Street, Melbourne, in 1938. It took 79 years belated, and we did that on Kristallnacht, which was the 9th of November last year. And now, with that backstory to what's happening, so this year, Kristallnacht 80th anniversary was last Friday, but it took Uncle William 4 weeks to do the protest. He waited till the end of November, believing that the world would read the same headlines that he had read, and they would do something, because William Cooper apparently said if somebody doesn't stop Hitler, there's going to be a genocide. But nobody listened to him because he's a black fella, and who gives an F what a black fella? Nobody listened, and the Holocaust happened. and end of November, 1st, 2nd of December, still nothing happened. William Cooper had read the newspaper on the 11th of November on Remembrance Day, hoping to read about lots of information about the 20th anniversary of the end of World War I. Remember last Sunday was the 100th Remembrance Day? He read all about, instead of the headlines in the front of the Argus, wasn't it? The newspaper he used to read? Instead of it all being about 20 years on from the end of World War I, instead the front, you can go to the State Library in Swanston Street. All the headlines of all the papers were all about World War starting again. It was now about, the 11th of November wasn't about 20 years on from the war. It was about Germany having broken windows. It was all about, and William Cooper read that. He said, this is racism. This is blatant racism. It's not random acts. I've lived, at that stage, 77 he was. I've lived 77 years and I know what racism's like. So when the world didn't do something, 2, 3, 3.5 weeks, he called together that group of activists he was just talking about, called the Advancement League. And the 3rd or 4th of December they had a meeting. They decided to pass a motion, just we, the Aboriginals of Australia, disagree with what Hitler's doing in Germany and we are going to make it known. I mean, if William Cooper wanted to go to Germany or others could have got, go and knock off Hitler, they couldn't get passports because they weren't citizens. I mean, the ironies in this story. But 5th of December, they finally typed out the letter of protest. They made an appointment. They had the political savvy to book an appointment at 11:30 in the morning on Tuesday, December the 6th, 1938. But when William Cooper turned up, as you heard Uncle Boydie say, the guards cancelled the appointment. They realised, A, it was an Aboriginal, and how dare a group of Aboriginals protesting tell us, the Nazis who know about the sort of races that should be there, they're not going to tell us how to live. They slammed the doors and the meeting never happened. So 4 weeks after Kristallnacht that happened, when the world hadn't done anything. 80 years on, finally answering the question, 80 years on will be therefore 4 weeks from last week, which is the 6th of December, 3 weeks from yesterday. It's a Thursday. It happens to coincide with a Jewish festival called Hanukkah, which is always around about Christmas time. This year it's early in December. So around Hanukkah time, on the 5th of the 8 candles of Hanukkah, we're going to do a reenactment march from 4 different parts of Melbourne. One of them is here, which is why we were standing here now. One of them will be William Cooper's house in Southampton Street, Footscray. This is the north one, that's the west one. There's one from the south near South Melbourne. There's one from the east, East Melbourne, where the Doug Nicholls statues are, outside the East Melbourne Synagogue in Albert Street, next to Parliament Gardens. And the 4 of them will merge. This one will leave about 5:30. The 4 of them will merge at Flagstaff Gardens at 6:30 on the December the 6th. And then from 6:30, a big group will gather there. We're going to march through the city, past the German consulate, to down near the Yarra, which is where William Cooper used to stand on a soapbox and talk to people about why you've got to stand up for human rights. We're going to reenact it on the exact day, the 80th anniversary. If any of you are free, if any of you know people who are in Melbourne or could be in Melbourne, if you won't be, 3 weeks from last night, if you want to be here at 5:30 or Flagstaff Gardens where the main march starts at 6:30, the website, you won't forget it, you don't need to write it down. We're calling it Walking Together. The website is walkingtogether.org.au. You'll find it in a second, and all the links are up there. I've got one flyer with me because I wasn't expecting this. We've got t-shirts for sale for $29, which are literally hot off the press. We've just printed them yesterday, so if anybody wants one. And we'd love to see at least 10 different media stories appearing between now and the 6th of December to get a whole crowd of people there. Thank you for listening.
Thank you very much to you both.